had my note to record, and I moved it off my screen so I could see what I was doing, and then of course I forgot. So just to let everyone know, this is recorded, so that way if for those who weren't able to attend in person, that they will receive the recording, but you will also if you miss any piece of this. So the way that today's webinar is going to work is I'm going to do a short presentation on what it means to be trauma informed, and then we are going to hear from our panelists, Chief Monahan, Judge Portley, Laura Wiggins, and Claire Louge. And it's great. They all represent a different sector to really have that conversation, like what does being trauma informed mean, especially within your organization, within your sector, as with you as an individual, and really hope to have all those questions. Please feel free to utilize the chat. And again, if you click to everyone so that way we all can see it. If you want to keep it individually just to us, you may also, but we really like having that conversation in the chat. And you're also more than welcome to use the question and answer for the feature in Zoom. So let's get started. What does it mean to be trauma informed? Our goal for today is really to just have some critical thinking about this. Like, what does this information mean for us, for individually? What does it mean when it comes to our family? What does it mean for people we know, for society, for our job, for our community as a whole? We are all still fully in the midst of the COVID pandemic, and that does not look like it is going away, right? We have a new quote normal, which I'm sure people are tired of hearing, the new normal. We're tired of flexing. We're tired of adapting. However, that's where we're at, right? And that's where all of society is at. And so when we're looking at this trauma-informed approach, what does this mean even just for society and our community in general when we're going out and interacting? So let's get into trauma and trauma-informed care, right? Trauma is that experience that threatens life, may cause physical injury. But really the most important piece to understand when it comes to trauma is anything that overwhelms an individual's capacity to cope. So we can all have the exact same event happen to us, and we're all going to respond in different ways because there are so many different factors that go into if our body is going to experience that event as trauma, right? And the way that happens is because it's going to overwhelm that individual's capacity to cope. So when I speak of trauma, in the rest of the hour, we're not speaking about a certain event. We're not looking at specific instances. We're looking really, when we're talking about looking at this trauma-informed lens, we're looking at that whole body system, right? And you'll hear me use system across the board, whether it means a person and their person system, whether it means a family and their family system, organizations, and full statewide systems, right? Because we all kind of interact in that same way. So when we're looking at using this trauma-informed lens, like what does that even mean? It's really changing that languaging, right? That shift from looking at, and this has been in the chat also, but looking at what has happened to you versus what's wrong with you, right? Having that kind of shift in perception. When we're looking at behaviors, when we're looking at the presentation of trauma symptoms, what need does this meet versus why would you do this? Why would you act like that? Why would you respond like that? But what need does this meet? Right. And that's really when we're talking about being trauma informed, it's really that shift, right, in the way that we are looking and interacting with not only ourselves, but with others and systems across. Trauma-informed care itself is really that strengths-based framework, right? It's grounded in that understanding and the responsiveness to the impact of trauma. It's understanding that we all come from different walks of life and different backgrounds and different experiences in our whole life, and how we can create those opportunities within our organizations for survivors to rebuild that kind of sense of control and empowerment. And I think for our organization pieces too, it takes it in a little bit in looking at that organizational system. I would say rebuilding that whole sense of control and empowerment within that organization, since organization is really just a conglomeration of people, right, of humans. So what does Samsa say about trauma-informed care? They have broken it down into the 4 R's, right? Realize, recognize, respond, and resisting re-traumatization. So really realizing, right, that the widespread impact of trauma is there and that we can recover, right? It's not that there is hope, there is healing, there is resilience, there's post-traumatic growth, all of that. But we still need to realize that trauma is impacting a lot of what we do. Recognizing the signs, the symptoms of trauma, what that looks like, right? When do we know when we are coming from a trauma response? When are others coming from a trauma response? Being able to recognize those pieces. Respond by fully integrating that knowledge into our policies, into our procedures, into our practices, right? Into our every way of being. And when we're talking about this, recognizing and responding and things, when we're looking at the system, when it comes to that organizational piece that I'm sure everyone will touch on later, is if we can look at our systems and our organizations as one kind of being and apply all of the principles that we apply to our own personal beings when it comes to responding to trauma, it makes the process go a lot smoother, right? And resist re-traumatization. On here it says resist re-traumatization of children as well as the adults who care for them. I would just say resist re-traumatization, period. Right? We all have our own story, especially for the people in our health and human services industry, which the majority of us here are. If we look statistically, over 80% of us have our own personal story with trauma. That means there are a lot of stories that we are bringing into our interaction with each other, right? And paying attention to those pieces. Samsa has 6 key principles when they look at having this trauma-informed approach. I like that safety is up at top because safety really is that number one piece, right? When we're bringing in this trauma-informed lens, is creating that safe space. Having trustworthiness and transparency, peer support. So we have that ability for that protective factor of support, of community support, especially from people with lived experience who have gone through similar things. Having that collaboration and mutuality, right, where we're able to work with multiple partners to really bring in that support from multiple sectors around. Empowerment, voice, and choice. We know that, along with the effects of trauma is that loss of control, and having things as simple as having people be able to have a voice, have a choice, have that piece of their own personal empowerment, in that it helps create that safety that we are looking to create, right? And then always paying attention to cultural, historical, and gender issues. Not every culture looks at, the responses in the exact same way, right? Just because in my family system, we may have talked about it and we may, have gone into long details about all of the things that have happened. That is not the case in other cultures, right? There are other cultures out there that talking about their trauma is absolutely against. you know, their belief systems. And so we really need to look when we're creating that trauma-informed approach of how does that look within our different cultures? How does that look within our different genders? And I would say even our different sectors, right, within our organizations. Some of our organizations have you know, different principles that have been the case for so long that when we look at changing systems, we really need to pay attention to what has been there and how to go about changing it in a way that is effective, right? I really like this quote. It is from a trauma survivor, and it says, "If I could ask for anything, it would be for you to listen and be kind." And really, doesn't it all come down to that? As simple as that when we're looking at that trauma-informed approach, right? You know, we're talking about this shift, and we're talking about this kind of, you know, change in mindset, and really want us all to kind of just think a little bit as we're having this conversation, as we have heard trauma-informed approach a lot, right? But have we looked at the trauma responsive environment? Is that trauma responsive? Is that a better way, a better term to put where we're going, right? To what we're trying to create. We want everyone to be informed of this, but when we can create that responsive environment, you know, by increasing the core safety needs to help minimize the reactions of everyone, that's when that shift is able to happen, right? We're able to shift from that trauma-informed environment to that trauma responsive environment. We're able to shift from being safe, right, to feeling safe, right? How does that work within that person's system? And looking from that shift from self-control to self-regulation. As you've noticed, there's, you know, we had that shift slide at the beginning and we have that shift slide now. I hope it helps us understand that the most important thing that we're talking about when we're talking about trauma responsive environments is that it is a mindset, right? It's a shift in focus, a shift from what we have been doing to what we would like to be doing, right? To have that trauma responsive approach really is to look at how we are. What is our intentional action that we're putting? We talk about policies, we talk about procedures, and I think, you know, we all hear policies and procedures and it's like an automatic glitch in our brain that says, oof, I don't like dealing with those things. Those have been, you know, in place for so long and they feel really difficult and really, you know, hard to change. But really, if we look at it as what is our intentionality behind those? Because our intentional action, right, how we are, how we want to be, that will show up through that those policies and procedures and help to make it change a bit, right? And really looking at about expanding compassion, right? It's not what trauma responsive environments are not. They're not a checklist. You'll hear it from everyone that talks. It would be really great if we could say, hey, here's your template. All you have to do is check this box, that box, this box, that box, do this training, do that training, and boom, you know, you have a trauma responsive environment, right? It's not something you do, it's something that we are, right? Unfortunately, it's not a cookie cutter formula that we can apply across the board, which is really the entire reason that Claire and I have discussed having these webinars, is because we talk about becoming trauma informed. We talk about trauma informed organizations and trauma responsive organizations. But because there isn't that blueprint, because there isn't a map, because it looks different for everybody, we were like, maybe we should showcase that and let everybody know, right? That, you know, as you're going through your organization, it just may not be as simple as, hey, can we do this training and expect everything to change? And really, like, why are we doing this? Why do we even want to create these these trauma-informed environments, right? These trauma-informed, trauma-responsive environments. It's because every single one of us is powerful, every one of us. And when we can create these environments, when we can do this shift in mindset, and that's the shift that starts with us. It starts with us personally, right? When we can create this shifts, that's when we can have healing. And we can have healing of systems, which we all know desperately needs to happen, right? And those healings, you know, changing, having that relationship piece is incredibly important, as I'm sure you'll hear from everyone, of how important relationships were to even start the process, right, of shifting within their space. And understanding that development of those safe relationships is really a key, one of our first key pieces of moving forward. So, are there any questions before we meet our panelists? Because I'm super excited to hear what everyone has to say, like I'm sure everyone else is, but I don't want to move forward from this piece if there are any questions out there. Okay, well, let's go to meet the panelists. I am actually going to take off my screen sharing so that way we can see everybody's faces. There we go. And then I will just call for, if you would introduce yourself, the organizational space that you are representing, and and then we'll go into the question of what it is to be trauma informed for yourself. Claire, you've already introduced yourself. Would you like to go?
Yes, and then I'll pass it on to the next person. So hey everyone, again, my name is Claire Louge, and I am the Executive Director of Prevent Child Abuse Arizona. We are a statewide nonprofit organization, and our mission is to strengthen families and protect children through collaboration, education, and advocacy. Also notable for me and my story, what I'm going to share is I've been the leader of Prevent Child Abuse Arizona for a year and a half. And so that's my context in terms of the organizational space that I am involved in. So I'm going to pass it off to Chief Monahan.
Thank you, Claire. My name is Jerald Monahan. I'm the program director for the Administration of Justice Studies program here at Yavapai College, and the director of the Yavapai College Justice Institute. This is a new position for me. I'm full-time faculty after 42 years in public safety here in Arizona. And I know what you're all thinking, that young man was 42 years in public safety. Anyway, I did spend some time with the End Violence Against Women International Organization. I've been involved in addressing issues of violence against women and gender-related violence since the mid-90s. So happy to be here and to contribute.
Thank you. Portley.
Good afternoon. I'm Maurice Portley. I'm a senior director for KC Family Programs in its judicial and national engagement. I've been there for 4 years, and the purpose of KC through the ultimate mission is to find ways to help and reduce the need for foster care so that we can, in fact, try to minimize the number of children who need to be in foster care, since good and healthy and strong families can find ways to keep their children safe. But before that, I was a state court judge. I was in Maricopa County for 12 years, including 6 on the juvenile court and 4 as the presiding judge of the juvenile court, which I found to be a vocation. It wasn't merely a job. And I like to wander through detention at, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night and talk to staff and talk to the kids who might still be awake. And then I spent 13 years on the Arizona Court of Appeals. And when Casey came after I retired, it seemed to be a wonderful opportunity because back in the 90s, when I was a pup of a judge, they were just beginning the ACEs study in 1995. Okay. And we didn't talk about trauma in the manner that we're going to be talking about it today, but there were many, many people back then and before the results came out and everything else who understood and appreciated that we all walk in different shoes and all of our experiences aren't the same, whether you're in the civil court or the probate court, family court, or juvenile court. So it's been a wonderful experience and I'm looking forward to this. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I am Laura Wiggins. I am the Regional Clinical Director with the Menta Group. We are a nonprofit organization that partners with school districts to provide clinical and educational supports to kiddos that are typically too unsafe or the school district just doesn't have the services to meet the students' needs. And so I've been with them for 6 years now. I started as a principal in 2016 in Mesa, and we were doing a great job with kiddos. We had strong clinical supports. We were a PBIS school, good things were happening, but there were still a handful of kids that would have these gigantic crisis moments. And it just seemed like we weren't meeting all the students' needs. And so I met a woman named Marcia Stanton, and was introduced to the Arizona ACEs Consortium. And it was kind of this aha moment of like, this is what we need. This is what we're missing. And so our organization hired a consultant and took our entire staff through an entire year of implementation and training. And we have since expanded it to all of our sites throughout Arizona. So today I represent the schools as an organization, and I'm also a chair for the Arizona Trauma Sensitive Schools as well.
Thank you all so much for joining us. I would love if we would kind of look at, what does being trauma informed not only mean to you, but what does that look like within the system that you are working in? Claire, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you, Angie. So everyone, when we were planning this webinar, we were looking for panelists, of course, to represent a diversity of sectors, to represent the trauma-informed approach and what it means. And Angie asked if I would be a panelist, and I said, no, that's not a good idea. Why is that? Because I wouldn't say that, I am reluctant to say that my organization is a trauma-informed organization. And that doesn't mean that we don't practice trauma-informed principles. But I'm reluctant to say something like, yeah, we've arrived. We're a trauma-informed organization. And to me, that's because it's kind of like fitness or health. Do you really arrive at health and then you're there forever? No, it really is about practicing things that make you practice the trauma-informed approach. So to me, it's too easy to just say, oh yes, we're trauma-informed, we've got that down, and now let's go and do our work. It really is something that we integrate in everything that we do. And for me, it means primarily and first, how we treat each other. How we treat each other as staff, how we treat the people that we talk to, our partners, how we interact with them. It's how we build those relationships in a way that is authentic, in a way that is compassionate and that respects the other person and that understands the context and the conditions that people are within. One thing that I want to say before I pass it on to the other panelists who probably have lots of wonderful things to say and more expertise than I do is that it's, when I think about the trauma-informed approach and how it's typically articulated, there's sometimes this divide that becomes apparent between those that are team compassion and giving everyone compassion, and then others that may say, well, no, we have to hold people accountable for their behaviors. And so I see this divide between people who are team compassion and team accountability. It's actually not about either of those things. It is about both of those things. It is absolutely possible to hold people accountable for behaviors that are not acceptable with compassion. And so especially in our work with humans, it's about practicing that gray area. And what I ask myself when I think of, am I applying the trauma-informed approach here? And by the way, I screw up all the time. And I think that's how I take accountability, being like, I'm not gonna be perfect at this. And sometimes I do act in a way that is not compassionate, that is more coming from a reactive approach myself, right? And then I know I have to practice self-regulation, self-compassion, and then take accountability for that behavior and correct it, right? I ask myself, am I treating this person like I want to be treated? Am I holding this person accountable in a way that I would like to be held accountable? And just treating people like they are someone that you care about and value, that's kind of the way. But of course, you're never going to do it perfectly because you're human. I'm never going to do it perfectly. I wish I did because I'm human, but it is about that practice to me.
Yes. Who would like to go next? I'm going to call you, Laura. You want to talk about it in the school system?
I'll go next, sure. So everything that Claire said and more. When I was principal leading the charge of this whole idea of becoming trauma informed and trauma sensitive, and what did that mean? And what did we need to do? It really started with us just having the courageous conversations with each other and understanding the neuroscience behind the threat response. I started out as a special education teacher. I earned a master's degree in social work. I became a principal, and I had really not very much background, honestly, in the threat response and what that does to the brains and bodies of adults, let alone little human beings that we were working with. And so it was invaluable to really carve out the time and the space to learn together. And in that learning, there were a lot of difficult, messy moments of staff wondering, did I do this wrong? Did I do this right? Them being triggered with their own trauma in the midst of what we were doing. And so it was a journey. It was a process. It truly is never ending. And I think that's because we're evolving as human beings, but also the science continues to evolve as we become more innovative and we're learning more about what trauma does to the brain, and particular to kids and their ability to learn in our traditional schools, the way that they're set up. And so for us, we really focused on building relationships with one another so that we could have those courageous conversations and we could work through barriers, and we could share in the excitements of seeing a kiddo who was throwing desks every day, not throw the desks today. Those were wins that we were able to share with each other. We we're able to bring in our community. So partnering with the district, partnering with our families. One of the most exciting things was building relationships with families and them coming in and saying, what are you doing with our kiddo? Because he's taking deep breaths and he's telling me. And so we were teaching ourselves to self-regulate with the kids. They were learning to self-regulate, and then they were teaching it, which is so exciting. And it was one of the best things I think that came out of it. We saw increases in academics because we know that one of the key parts of becoming trauma responsive is just establishing safety and connection within the program. And so once we kind of had systems of safety and connection, and our staff were confident and we're bringing that with them each and every day, our academic scores went up, our attendance scores went up. And to put it into context, we have a building full of kiddos that would otherwise be expelled or suspended or in the justice system at some point. So for them to be coming to school every single day, graduating, getting jobs was a huge, huge win for us. And it was just kind of, we had hoped that we would see these positive outcomes, but we didn't know. There wasn't a lot of data out there. There wasn't a lot of talk about it. So we were just kind of day by day trying to figure it out. Teacher satisfaction increased. There's a teacher shortage in the United States, in particular in Arizona, and then to find teachers that want to work with kids with significant emotional disabilities, or I would argue kids with trauma, can be very challenging. And so for us to have increased teacher satisfaction and increased teacher retention was a huge, huge win for us. Yeah, it was like mind blowing. We don't suspend or expel regardless, but I know in a lot of other schools that with trauma responsive practices, they see reductions in the big crisis behaviors, suspensions, expulsion, decreases in bullying, dropout rates. And so for us, again, it was really focusing on relationships, understanding the science, and really having our teammates invest in learning the science, and the messy part of like going back and be like, I messed up. I could have done this different, or I could have done this better. And then just really getting the kids involved. And we saw amazing, amazing outcomes.
Thank you, Laura. I know that, we all know that, having trauma-informed, trauma-responsive schools is definitely a conversation that is being had, all around. And, there isn't, it's so new within the systems that there really isn't a lot of data. It's really great when we can have that, discussion of what that looks like when we've put those, pieces, and also letting everyone know, just like Claire did, that it's messy, that it's not perfect. And I think we all think that things need to be perfect. And, if we were truly coming from a trauma-informed space, we would understand that there is no such thing as perfection. And the moment we can give ourselves compassion for that is the moment that we can, make mistakes and find that accountability piece in it. Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, really quick, you just brought up a point. It's really hard. Our teachers are working so hard, and they really, really want to do their very, very best. And there are so many pressures to have academic scores be up here and to have learning, at this pace. And if you can reach out and support your teachers and your school districts that are even talking about trauma informed, it is huge, because they want training, they want to be doing these things, but they really need the support from us as a community to really be able to implement and get these things happening in our kids' classrooms.
Yeah, absolutely. Chief Monahan.
Yeah, thank you, Angie. And Laura, being full-time faculty here at the college now, I can definitely relate. I had no idea that being faculty was so involved, but I'm very proud of our college, though, because of the efforts on campus to address the various needs of not only our students, but staff and faculty and visitors as well. I'm representing the law enforcement public safety community on this panel. Again, 42 years in that service. I've had some unique experiences because for many years I had the opportunity to work with Dr. Neil Websdale at the National Domestic Violence Fatality Review Initiative, and with Joanne Archambault and the End Violence Against Women International Organization, and really had the opportunity to have, you know, kind of your eyes opened to what we're talking about, with understanding what does trauma look like and how does it impact somebody's behavior that the law enforcement community, that the police and deputies are going to run and have encounters with, and then providing true justice by responding in a way that takes into account trauma behavior, people that are behaving in ways that are impacted because of trauma and experiences in their own life. I appreciate Angie's presentation, and she talked about mindset. One of the things our campus adopted was a formal training called the Outward Mindset by the Arbiter Institute. And this is designed to help us understand that we grow up seeing the world and arranging our judgments and our approach based on our worldview. And we see the world through our own reality. And to address trauma in others, we have to see the world through their reality as we provide services and as we respond, especially for us in policing and in our deputy sheriffs. In the 1970s, there was a New York Police Department psychologist that made the statement that first responders are in the position to do the most help, do the most good, but also do the most harm in that initial response that police have with people. And what we're learning now in policing, and we've got a long way to go, I'll be very honest with you, there's many improvements that still can be made the whole conversation nationally about police reform. This has to be a part of that conversation, because for too long, we have laid judgment and labels on people that have stuck with them through our records management system and with our repeated responses, where somebody is labeled in a certain way on a first call and then treated that way on follow-up calls. And if we get that wrong, we have done a huge injustice to another human being. I tell our officers when I would train that policing is a human business. And the majority of work that police officers and deputy sheriffs do is service related. It's not law enforcement. And so we have to approach this from the idea that we're in a service industry, just like many of the folks that are participating in this webinar are in. Couple of things about trauma informed for me and where it's in policing. We're seeing a lot of training around trauma informed interviewing. And again, getting back to Angie's presentation on Samsa's 6 principles, when a police officer, a detective, or a deputy interviews somebody that has experienced trauma, and typically I'm talking about probably the trauma of a sexual assault, the trauma of a domestic violence situation, that interview must start with the person being interviewed feeling safe, feeling like they have some choices. Can I sit here? Can I sit here? Little choices make a huge difference. Establishing trustworthiness of the interview to the person being interviewed. Empowering the person being interviewed where they can, letting them choose when the break's going to occur, or if they want a glass of water or not have a glass of water. And one of the parts of trustworthiness is that victim, that person experiencing trauma that's about to be interviewed, they're going to be looking at that interviewer, that officer, that detective, that deputy to see if that detective, if they're expressing empathy. Now, one of the challenges for us as professionals is we want to have this, well, we have to take a neutrality approach. We have to be neutral in our investigation. I disagree with that completely, because with neutrality comes this idea of indifference. And as the survivor quote in Angie's presentation earlier said, they're looking to see, are we going to treat them with kindness and with empathy? Are we going to express that we believe what they're telling us has merit? Or the Start by Believing campaign, which I know for some is a challenge, but we have to start there. Treat this human being as a human being who has merit and deserves our full attention and is treated with respect and kindness and with some understanding. So we expand this trauma-informed interviewing concept also to trauma-informed investigations, where in investigating a situation, we can look at how did this person behave before the event and how has this event now altered their behavior? That is good information to have in a police investigation because it speaks directly to the fact that this person experienced fear and a loss of control and some type of a traumatic experience. And when we look at the behavior of the person that committed the offense, we won't see that. Why? Because they were still in control. They did not experience the behavior. So we're wanting to, in the police community, in law enforcement, wanting to expand trauma-informed interviewing into the idea of victim-centered investigations, trauma-informed investigations. But again, as I said, we have a long way to go. We also have to pull in our dispatchers, our communications people, because when an individual calls in on 911, how they're treated on that phone can make a difference in whether or not they want to stay the course and report and be a part of that investigations. One of the things I would offer as a call to action, and for those of you that have connections within law enforcement leadership or your public safety department, we need to teach these at the academy, the police academy. We need to get this training at the very beginning of a career. Too often we're seeing this specialized training only go to detectives that work in the arena of child abuse or sexual assault. But it's our first responders. It's those young men and women officers and deputies that are having that initial interaction that need to understand trauma experiences. And then even in our hiring practices, let's look for individuals to enter into the public safety arena who can understand that their worldview exists, but they have to practice operating from other people's worldviews and reality. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this, Angie, and it's so great to work with this panel.
Well, you just gave me the chills, and I can see from the comments in the chat that it is that same space. I know that a lot of us don't hear these things. We believe them and we wish. So I think for everyone to hear it from you, it kind of adds that other power to all of those pieces. Judge Portley. Oh, you're muted.
Sure, 18 months on Zoom, and
I get it.
You know, there were things I know when I was on the bench, and still, if I think it's been done, and yet I may need to do something. But thank you, Chief. That was wonderful. If you think back on TV judges or movie judges, or even my favorite judge, Paul Newman, as Judge Roy Bean, you will find little of a trauma-informed judge. Paul Newman would just pull out a pistol and shoot you. You know, justice was served west of the Pecos. We've evolved. Hopefully no one sitting on the trial court bench is acting like Judge Judy. And people sometimes want that. I saw something once where a woman complained that she was flown to California, she got paid, but she wasn't on TV because she wanted the judge to yell at the other person. And similarly, when Justice Sotomayor, when she was testifying at her confirmation, talked about how it was important to be empathetic, was ridiculed. Now, maybe they can't be as empathetic at the United States Supreme Court level, but definitely should be at the district court level and definitely should be at the state court level. Because at one point in time, we were lawyers. And we wanted our clients to be treated with dignity and respect. And so if we get the call or get elected to the bench, we should do the same. And we should be mindful that although we're excited to drive to work and put on the robe and jump on the bench and do justice, the courthouse is kind of a strange and scary place for many, many people. Who likes to get the jury notice? Okay, think about that. That creates its first trauma. And what do people try to do immediately? What can I do to get out of this? Immediately, not because the process may necessarily be traumatic, but their think of it is going to be traumatic. They're going to have to get off of work or whatever else they may do. And if not, think about someone who is called as a witness or a litigant and any of the different departments. You've got to find parking. You have to get through security. You have to find out which courtroom or where you're supposed to go. And who do you ask? And how do you get this information? And whether you're going to the federal courthouse or the Mesa court or the court in your community. I love the Yavapai courthouse. It's such a wonderful and grand courthouse. And then you wait. Does anyone tell you what's going on? And what happens in all of us, regardless of our experience, is anxiety and stress. So if you have to go to see your doctor later in the afternoon, do not go to court first. Your blood pressure will be out the roof. Another good thing, don't spend the weekend with your mom and eating doubles, because you'll eat like you're a kid because she wants you to. Mom, I'm over 60. I can't metabolize those hamburgers like I used to. It's okay. You'll be fine. But it's important as we are thinking about, how places that the court interacts with people, in the parking lot, in security, in the clerk's office, in waiting rooms, inside before the judge comes out, that we try to have all of our staff and everyone else around treat them with dignity and respect. And we try to tell the lawyers the same. It's fine because you know each other and you're talking, but when you come together and your client is there, remember your client is there. Whether it's a parent alleged to have committed abuse or neglect, or a person, for a far more serious offense, or just a parent, fighting over custody or domestic violence or anything else, being mindful of what they're seeing. It's easy. We go to court all the time. We're talking to each other. We're kidding each other. We're talking trash. And our clients don't see it that way. They're not appreciative. And one of the things we try to do, and we've talked about with lawyers, especially in the dependency, carry granola bars for your client. If they've had to travel to court they may be a little hungry, their blood sugar may be down, and this will help them amongst everything else. They're going to need a little energy. And just to think how this stress has been compounded by COVID and the courts. Are you going to have a hearing? Is it going to be by Zoom or whatever platform a court may use? You know, are you going to get on? Many people like Zoom for the convenience. You don't have to take off from work. You don't have to travel to court. But at the same time, you may not be heard all the time. You know, if you need a private space, can you and your lawyer go to a breakout room? You know, can you, if you're on the phone, you know, can you otherwise be heard? And what's the language being used? You know, I know some very big words that my high school teacher taught me so that I could do well on the SAT and LSAT and write wonderfully when I'm writing for, you know, others. But when we're talking to people, we need to be able to ensure that they appreciate us, not only that we're loud enough or use a microphone, but that we're not terrorizing them, you know, or re-traumatizing them. Or asking a kid, well, you know, what would you like to do when you grow up? And the one thing I once broke my heart is, it goes, I don't know. I said, well, you know, I want to be a, you know, and then, you know, really nothing? Not a police officer, not a fireman. You know, that told me that child wasn't dreaming, did not have hope. And in our positions as judges, you know, we can do things to lighten and to help. Now, ultimately, what we have to do is very serious. And it's going to have an impact on that family for who knows how long. But A, we don't have to take ourselves too seriously. But more important, we can do it in a gentle way. How many movies and shows have you seen where a judge in a criminal case is reading the riot act to the defendant? Like it matters. The person's been, you know, caught, been interviewed, has been shackled, and been found guilty, and the only real question is the length of the sentence. You know, and if I don't need to speak extra words that won't do anything, won't be helpful, then I'm wasting and it's not helping that person, or it's not helping that parent. Just to think in a dependency, I want you to be a better parent. Well, how? What do I need to learn in order to do that? I've not had that, you know, and too many of our dependency parents may have been dependent themselves or had parental rights terminated. So how do you do that? How do you, as a person without that experience, try to live up to this middle class system where you've had no experience in doing that? And we have to recognize that in our language and in our tone. And you know, we need to ask, you know, the simple questions. You know, are you and your therapist getting along? What's going on? You know, because just to think, for those of us with health insurance, we can go to different therapists and different doctors until we find a match. And they may not have that benefit. So, you know, respect by using the names of the parents and the litigants and the child. And if we do that over the period of time, there may be some trust, because it'll develop by listening, both to what they're telling us and maybe what they're not telling us. You know, I like the fact that I was in the juvenile court when, you know, we had both the children. And so I was living the life of a parent when I wasn't on the bench and, you know, talking to my children's teachers and talking to, their friends' parents and other things. And so, it's important to reduce that stress, to listen as best we can, and then we'll have to do what we have to do, but we don't have to do it in a mean manner, because we all have our special privilege, and because I wear a robe, I have real special privilege. It's important that judges will do what they need to do, but they don't need to do it in a manner that's disrespectful, that doesn't involve listening, and trying to find a way to help in simple things, whether it's a granola bar, or it's whether telling someone you've done good, or even asking, what good has happened to you in the last week or since I saw you? I was on a Zoom call yesterday, and a kid came in to see one of our staff members, and her face just lit up when her child came in, and needing something. And isn't that what we all want for all of our children?
Yeah. Isn't that what we all want as humans, even adults, to walk into the room and have someone light up, right, that we are there. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your perspectives, especially in all the different sectors. I can tell from the comments through the thing that it's been very impactful for each one. I wish that we had time, about another couple hours to continue this conversation. I will really get into that kind of deep dive, but I do want to honor your time, since we're signed up for 1 hour, to let everyone know of our next webinars. In September, trauma-informed care begins with you. We've started this conversation about what does trauma-informed mean, and we're going to look at kind of dissecting that into what does it mean for you yourself as an individual, right? What is being trauma-informed mean within our spheres of influence? And then in November, possibly, it may be you presenting for all of us. And that is a journey of a trauma-informed organization. We are releasing a request for proposal, or a call for proposal. I believe that Simone or Claire will put the link in the chat for us, but we are looking for an organization that is working on becoming trauma-informed, that is willing to present at and for November's webinar, and we would like all of the different pieces. Claire, would you like to address this one?
Yes, so I just put the link to how to find more information about how to register for these webinars on the Prevent Child Abuse Arizona page. You can also register at the Arizona ACEs Consortium page too. And also on the Prevent Child Abuse Arizona page that I linked in my comment earlier, there is the application. If you would like to give this presentation on how your organization is trauma-informed at various levels in your organization, we would love to hear about your experience. I'm also getting another question about certificates of attendance. That's very important for many people. So my colleague Simone Tabasoli has put the link for the survey for today's webinar in the chat box. For those of you who answer the survey, you are eligible to receive a certificate of attendance, and we'll send that to the email list of those who respond to the survey.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us. Chief Monahan, Judge Portley, Laura, and Claire, thank you so much for having this open, honest space about, and I loved how everyone really kind of, echoed the same things. It is that piece of kindness, treating humans as humans. And how amazing of a world could we be in if we all treated every human as a human? And I know that, one statement that I've heard in my life is there are no extra humans. And that has always sat with me. That everyone, if we could only treat all of them how we wanted to be treated ourselves. So thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in the next months. Thank you all.
And Laura, there was a question about trauma-informed schools that came up in the question and answer. So if you would like, I can connect you to the person who asked, if you'd like to be connected.
Sure, that'd be great.